And good afternoon and welcome everyone. And today we have also got participants who are external to the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, including those from the Ministry of Education and some international schools in Malaysia. So welcome to the session. And before we start, please mute your microphones and please feel free to turn on your camera so that the speakers can see all of you. This is already the 9th workshop in the Innovations in ELT workshop series. And I think many of you who have joined this series will have known that this workshop series is initiated by our late Professor Dr. Gana Kumaran Subramaniam, the former head of school in University of Nottingham, Malaysia. If you look at the way in which the series is structured, then you will see that Prof. Gana had tried to cover a wide range of topics in relation to ELT, not just from the local perspectives, but also the international ones. Therefore, in this series, we have discussed with speakers around the world about 21st century ELT materials, teaching and learning, assessments, and also how these different aspects in education have changed during the pandemic. And I believe this series has really enriched students' knowledge and their exposure to what is really out there in education and ELT development globally. I think one of the things that the pandemic has done to us is that it created an opportunity, or maybe we can say that it prompted educators to make changes to teaching that have been in the works for a long time. And one of the examples is personalized learning, an approach that allows learners to learn at a different pace and in different ways. So today we will look at how bespoke or customized e-learning resources can cater for different needs of learners for personalized learning, leading to autonomous learning and more effective teaching and learning. So on behalf of Professor Gana, I would like to welcome and thank the speakers who support the University of Nottingham, Malaysia and School of Education and their generosity in sharing their knowledge and expertise with our students. And thank you again, Keith, for supporting Professor Dr. Gana's initiative. We have two speakers today. The first speaker is Jonson Chong. Welcome, Jonson.
Thank you.
Jonson is currently the Executive Director at Malaysiana LCMS. It is an education consulting firm that offers learning content management systems to help organizations grow bigger daily. He is a lawyer, a social entrepreneur, and also someone with very rich experience in education. He was the head of School of Business and Law at KDU University College and the lead consultant at Scope Group working on several projects on education. He was also the Parent Engagement Director at GEMS International School, Penang, and he worked as Director of Corporate Affairs at the Fairview Education Group. Welcome, Jonson.
Thank you.
And our second speaker is David Chu. He is the Digital Business Manager for UBSM. And I think you are very familiar with him because he presented at one of our sessions earlier. And as Dr. Gana said, UBSM is synonymous to higher education in this country. Because those days, if anyone thought of getting any books in any disciplines, then the first thing they would think of is UBSM. They are market leaders in innovations and materials, and they provide access to materials to teachers and institutions. David is an expert in digital management. He is a product specialist and trainer for global brands like Britannica Online Learning, National Geographic Virtual Library, and so on. He brings along a wealth of work experience into the education industries. These two speakers will share with us two bespoke learning resources. One is BKSB and another is PressReader. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to the speakers. So over to you, Jonson.
Thank you, Xinyu, and good afternoon to everybody. Before I begin, I'd like to thank University of Nottingham School of Education for giving me the opportunity to talk about BKSB. Now, before I start, let me just share. Okay, I believe you can see my screen now. So today, okay, before that though, can everybody do me a favor? I prefer to be able to see the people that I'm speaking to. So Can you just turn on your video for like 30 seconds so at least I know what you look like, and then I can connect with you all. Okay, Mashita is there. There's Ken. There's Dune. Okay, thank you very much. Tiffany. Okay, the rest are still shy. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so let's get back to our presentation here, our talk here, yeah? So today, the learning resource that I will be sharing with you is BKSB, and as you can see on the screen, it is for English and Math skills. But since this workshop, this ELT workshop is mainly focused on English, I will also focus on English for this particular resource. And just want to note that I'm presenting on behalf of BKSB, yeah, which is a UK-based company. So let me tell you a little bit more about BKSB first. It has been established since 1997, and it runs one of the world's leading online assessment and learning platforms for English and Maths. I keep repeating English and Maths, but actually they also have digital skills and science, but that's not their main subject, so we'll leave that aside for now. But on this slide, I just wanted you to note that they are an award-winning edtech company, right? Okay, so moving on, I think this question nowadays people seldom ask, but because of COVID-19, it's just made online learning so important. But actually, you know, even before that, BKSB, through their research and all that, they've discovered that actually on average, students retain at least 25% or more information when they are learning online. And e-learners tend to learn up to 5 times more in the same time that they spend in training, okay? So it's just that nowadays, well, at least last year, or maybe even later again this year, hopefully not, that, you know, when people get locked down, when they have to do learning online or at home, this is one way of doing it. Now, I know BKSB is not well known in Malaysia, so let me just share with you some numbers to indicate what they have achieved over the last 20 years. In 2019 alone, this was before COVID-19, take note, there were 150 million BKSB assessments taken, right? And they are used by 85% of UK colleges and 71% of Australian TAFE colleges. TAFE is the Technical and Further Education colleges, which is like our TVET, okay? Now, what does BKSB do, or what do they offer? Mainly, they have 2 programs. One is called Focus Functional Skills, and the other is GCSE Achieve. GCSE, I think you all will be familiar with that. That's the General Certificate of Secondary Education, which is based in the UK. In Malaysia, if you went through an international school, you would have taken IGCSE, the international version of GCSE, right? Now, what are functional skills? Functional skills are prescribed standards in the UK for employment purposes. So they focus on 3 subjects that are English, Maths, and ICT. But again, since we are talking about English learning, so I'm not going to talk about the other 2 subjects. Basically, the 2 programs have 4 steps in the process. The first is an initial assessment, which captures a snapshot of the learner's ability. Then there is a diagnostic assessment, which will find the skill gaps in the user's knowledge, and then provide an individual learning plan for the user, where then in learning resource, they will be able to access. So for the 4th step, if you're doing the functional skills, you will get to progress check, right? Whereas for GCSE, you will get to do preparation for the GCSE exams. So here's a bit more information about each of those steps, right? So the initial assessment for functional skills, I'm focusing on functional skills here, just as an example. They are both quite similar, okay? So they start the assessment at entry 3 and assess between pre-entry, meaning pre-entry 1, 2, 3, and then there's level 1 and level 2. Those are the levels in the UK functional skills standards. And the assessment is actually quite fast, takes about 35 minutes, 30 to 35 minutes, 20 questions in maths, 18 in English, right? And each assessment has different questions because this is adaptive assessment. It depends on how the user answers it. So even selecting the next question will depend on how you've answered the previous questions. And they use a complex set of algorithms to do the calculation here. Now, this slide will show you an example of a report at the end of the assessment. As you can see here, okay, you can see my cursor, right, on the slide. So you see here, the user was able to answer some harder questions above level 2, but then later on could not answer those questions and he dropped below level 1. So the estimate is at slightly above level 1. Okay, so this is just at the initial assessment. Then we get to the diagnostic assessment, whereby the assessment will identify the skill gaps. So this is based on the individual learning plan, right? Or to produce an individual learning plan, they need to identify the skill gaps. So this one is much longer questions you can see here. So again, we are looking at 2 different subjects, but let's zoom in on the English. So for English, they will put entry 1, entry 2, 30 questions, entry 3 to level 2, 36 questions. Then from there, they will again compute or identify where the skill gaps are. As you can see here, the second last point, the system continues to estimate ability after each response, right? And they will, even within just one subject, but within the different topics, they can give different levels. So for example, spelling, L1.3. So for example, vocabulary, they might be at L1.8, just as an example. Right. So after this assessment, this is the report that you will see. So if you look at the graph at the bottom, you can see this user, this hypothetical user, is best at spelling, punctuation, and so forth, but reading, quite weak. Writing, slightly better, but still weak. Right. So this will be then used, the information captured will be then used to create that independent, the individual learning plan. So this is in a more textual form to show where this person is at, okay? And there's a very detailed recommendation, which are the topics that they need to look at. So now after this, it is not that the user have to go and look for it. The system itself will present those courses, will present those, the learning resources for the user to access. Basically, they just have to click on start, So as mentioned just now, after the initial and diagnostic assessments, the learners will be signposted to relevant resources for their individual learning plan to work on the skill gaps. Now, this one, it is not just doing exercise. I know that there are many solutions out there where the user is bombarded with exercise after exercise to drill them in certain skills, whereas here is not. They also will provide content, for example, a video that talks about a and the, and how do you use this in sentences and so forth. Then only they will do the exercises. So you can see here, this, the second last point, it is not just for the users, the learners, it's also for the teachers. Here, of course, they call it tutors. In the UK, they use the term tutor for teachers. It's also for teachers because then the teachers can monitor their students, what they have done, what are the topics that they have done. And this takes the guesswork out of the teaching, because then the teacher can immediately identify where the students are weak in whatever areas, and they can also, in class, focus on this when they are coaching these particular students, right? So moving on, you'll see this is the screen that the students will see when they go to the learning resources. And then you can see there are, for different things like grammar, what level they are working at, and then what resource they are that they need to look at. So there are different things that they can work on, and sorry, didn't mean to move it here. The user can choose whether he or she wants to work on grammar first, or they want to work on spelling. So there is that flexibility there. It's not that you must work from the top down. All right. So the next slide is just to give you a example. Just now I mentioned there are videos that the users will click on to watch before they start working on the exercises. And these are also customized. It's not that every student will see all the same videos. The videos are also chosen by the system based on the assessment outcomes, right? So this one was the example that I gave just now, where they talked about indefinite and definite articles. Okay. Now, moving on. So the last step in functional skills is progress check. So basically, the user or learner gets a chance to check how far they've come after they've gone through the learning resources, whether they have improved and how much have they improved. And you see, even the progress checks, they are still interactive and they are self-marking. So the moment you click on the answer, the system is already marking whether it's correct or wrong, and they then put on the next question, even within the progress check. The progress check is not a static so-called assessment. All right. So that's why you see in the second last point, all learners have a bespoke set of questions, meaning a customized set of questions. Okay. And once that's done, you'll see this is the report, right? So just now it was, I think, in terms of this student's level, they were probably at a 1.2. Now they are closer to, say, a 1.75 probably, right? Okay, so this is essentially what the students that use functional skills will go through. But if they were using the GCSE Achieve program, then the final step is actually for them to practice for GCSE. So they will get exam questions and they will do those so-called under exam conditions, and then they'll see, you know, this is like drilling themselves. Okay. Now, some of you might be wondering, just now, because I talked about the levels and entry 1, 2, 3 and level 1, 2, how does that correspond to the other international standards? So if we are talking about CEFR, they are only up to C1, you can see, because this is for the functional skills for employment, unlike GCSE, which goes right up to C2, right, which is different. So entry 2, they are at A2 level. Entry 1 is actually at A1 level. I'm not sure why it's not shown here, but that's basically showing you the equivalence as well as the IELTS and TOEFL. Okay. Now, since we're talking about using AI, just to mention this, but I think a lot of this was, I was in last week's session where Sean spoke about the AI technology that they use is actually very similar. It's also item response theory. So it is very accurate because, you know, there are some not so advanced systems, they just give random questions, but the level of difficulty between questions cannot be exact. But of course, some people will say, oh, the difference in level is so small. But when you multiply that level of difference over 20 questions, then the difference will be significant. So that's why this system is based on item response, you know, how people respond to each particular question. Okay, so that's basically a quick snapshot of the data science behind BKSB. And now, just to blow the trumpet a little bit, just to share with you all, these are some of the clients of BKSB around the world. And you'll notice that it's not only academic or educational institutions, some big names there from the UK, Warwick, and then there's Australian ones, RMIT and Victoria University. But you'll see a lot of corporate organizations or business organizations as well, right? Like Mazda, KPMG, Boots, even British Gas. So actually, there are a lot of organizations and people out there that trust the standards and the quality of BKSB's online program. Yeah. So that was the last slide, and thank you very much. And well, I'll be here for any questions, but if later on you do have questions or you need more information, feel free to contact me as well. Okay, and I'll stop sharing so that I can pass the screen to David.
Oh, hi. Sorry, we can have a few minutes for question and answers after your session. So maybe you can take some questions right now before we get to David. So we have got, I saw some questions in the chat box. Right. Joy, she asked, how would the system produce customized questions if there are so many students with different levels in their English proficiency?
Okay. So this is exactly what AI is all about. AI is based on big data. So with all this data, we are talking about millions of users with answers to millions of questions. And based on that, the system is intelligent to recognize which level the student is at in terms of their English proficiency. And because the system is so powerful, by the way, it's based on Amazon's technology, right? They're so fast that the moment you answer, within like less than a second, they will present the next question that is suitable for that particular student at that particular point to assess whether, if let's say they answered correctly, can they answer another 0.1% higher than that? If they can't, then they will remain at that. If they can, then they will continue testing them just a little bit higher. I hope that answers Joy's question.
Joy is nodding her head, so I think.
Okay, right. So the next one is, I did not forget this, someone's name. How do you combat the initial weightage given to the first few questions? How do you combat that? Not sure if I understand your question, but once the system puts in the questions at whatever particular level, right? Entry 3, if you recall from that slides just now, if the student starts making mistakes and not able to answer at that level, then it will automatically produce questions that are at a lower level, and then it will respond to C when the user answers whether correctly and or incorrectly, and then they will adjust the questions as it goes along. Okay, I hope that answered the question. And from Arathi Jane Reddy. So for institutions, is the content taught still English or math, or can it be related to business learning? Well, unfortunately, not for business per se. However, English for business, yes. Math for business, yes, but not specific like in business principles or management strategies and so forth. Okay, that was a straightforward question. Okay. Oh, Arathi clarified non-academic institutions. Yeah, I think I have answered it. I think what you meant was whether the English and maths is related for business purposes rather than for academic purposes, and the answer is yes. That's the functional skills part of the program.